Managing your money and managing your debt is as critical to your future success as a healthcare professional as getting your diploma, performing your first physical, or prescribing your first pair of eyeglasses. Over the next 25 minutes, a group of financial, education, and healthcare professionals, as well as students who have been there, will offer some simple advice on how to take charge of your finances and minimize your debt.
It's very important to take charge of your finances. And that means right from the start. As soon as you think about a career in the health professions area, you have to think about how you're going to pay for it. There are many years of training and usually years of apprenticeship of some type, say internship and residency in the case of a physician, which means that there are many years where you will not be able to make a real significant income.
Most individuals who attend professional school are not there on their own finances. Roughly about 85% of all the people who attend professional schools need some financial assistance in order to finance that degree. Only 15% or so are there on their own or their family's resources. Going to professional school without financial aid would be like trying to get a house without a mortgage.
It's easy. It's in their power. It's one of the, if they can add 2 and 2, it's just that simple, do some division, they can achieve it. The important part is that debt is an investment when it's done for something like education because it provides an incredible return on their ability to develop their own lives, particularly in health professions, to help others become community leaders. It is just one of the most important things that they can possibly do. And it's so easy to do. It's just a matter of discipline, control, and most of all, just understanding how it works. That to limit their indebtedness, to get as much assistance as they can from families, from friends, from associations, from fraternities, from churches, from community groups, just lowers that amount of indebtedness and allows them to return to communities and make incredible contributions to the health care of the nation.
I want them to focus on what's their overall goal in life, and it's not about living high on the hog while they're in school. It's really about, I want to become a doctor, and I want to have a family, and I want to have a nice house, and I want to have a nice life for my children, and these kinds of things, and retire early. Well, you don't do that by living too high on the hog now. You're just robbing from your future if you do that. So it takes a little bit of time. Each and every individual student is different, and you have to find ways that they can understand that message and internalize it and then do something about it.
Create a budget and stick to it. Sounds simple, but it can be overwhelming, especially when you have unexpected expenses. Yet, a solid budget is essential to keeping your debt down.
Sit down and come up with a budget. That's the first thing that you need to do. And make a commitment to live within that budget.
When I get my student loan check in the mail or from the financial aid office, I put it in my savings account, and each month, because my budget is $1,000 a month, and I take $1,000 and transfer it over to my checking account a month. So that way I have my $1,000 for the month that I can just write checks for.
So it's important to budget your money just like you budget your time. I mean, you can't, do more than what one could expect in 24 hours in a day. Just think about your financial situation the same way. I mean, there's only so much money. You shouldn't spend money you don't have.
One of the things that I think is very important in terms of managing your finances is having kind of a perspective on the amount of money you will need over a period of time, a semester or a year.
I don't have a set budget, but I try to minimize my expenses.
It's the area of living expenses that represents the key to a student in terms of managing his or her finances. Because every student will be given a standard budget, an allowance that will provide a modest standard of living. But it's in that area where if you exercise control, you can borrow less.
The key is this: you need to have a tool in place to help you to manage your finances. The objective is to be able to budget. Budgeting meaning knowing what's coming in, what needs to go out every month, annually, so that you can have a better handle on the whole picture. One tool that you can use is the Debt Management Workbook. Another one is Quicken. Those two tools are very good in helping you to have a very good understanding, not just in terms of budgeting, but then looking at the actual information as it happens throughout the year and comparing the actual transactions to those budgets to make sure that you're meeting your goals throughout the year.
You know that most people will spend more time planning a trip to, say, Disney World or a cross-country vacation. They'll put more time and effort and energy and resources into that than they will for planning for their financial retirement.
You got to have a budget that's really flexible.
If a person has not got a budget and doesn't understand how much their monthly expenses are, where their income's coming from, they essentially will go like many people. They'll spend it as they got it. And if they end up short, well, they'll reach behind into their wallet and pull out their credit card and get some extra money that way, or borrow on future dollars that haven't been dispersed yet. Ultimately, that process represents a person who's out of control. And he or she will probably end up the year, if they're lucky, they may have enough to go along. If they're not, well, they will probably end up short and have to come up with some additional dollars one way or the other, and those will be very expensive dollars. They'll be additional credit or high-interest loans. But if they're in control of their budget, not only will they end up on target, they probably can realize less debt by managing their finances each and every month.
A lot of things to come up that you're not expecting, like you have to buy equipment at certain points you didn't even expect it. But if you have something, you know how much you spend that's fixed, you know how much your rent is, you know if you have a car, what your car payment is. But having the ability to know that, okay, I have $200 each month to take care of the unexpected, that kind of helps. And then getting help from your parents or whatever, you have a better control of that. It takes time to learn that, though. I mean, my first year, it was a lot different than this year, because this year I know approximately what it's going to take to be successful. Because finances is the last thing I want to be worried about while I'm at school.
Overuse of credit cards is one sure way to blow your budget and get into serious financial trouble. Paying with plastic is easy. The trouble starts when that bill comes due. Credit cards tempt us all, but young people often are the most vulnerable.
Try to avoid setting yourself up to fail and avoid the credit card trap.
I mean, that's the thing, that how it can fool you, because it's not your money, I mean, they're lending it to you. And you have to always keep that in the back of your mind, like, this is not money that you made to spend.
You have to understand it from the other perspective, too. The credit card company makes their money off of your interest. So they want you to charge more, and they want you to pay as little as possible. That's their motivation. Charge more, pay little. But your motivation should be to charge as little as possible and to pay off as much as possible, because it becomes almost unmanageable to manage credit card debt.
It's very easy to get caught up in the credit card game. You just put it on plastic and you don't see how much money you're spending. You don't keep up with it. It's not like having the ability to balance your checkbook. So a lot of times you don't realize how much money you've actually spent. And I'll tell you, these credit card companies give you a free credit card in a minute, and it always has a big line of credit on it. But if you don't have any way to pay it off, then it's a big mistake.
Once you start, it's hard to stop. It's like drugs. It's best to leave them alone, really. Only have them for emergency situations, only. Extreme emergency situations, like life or death.
I don't really use credit cards, so that's how I control it. I have like one, but the limit's like $100, so I can't do any damage with that. So I usually don't use credit cards. I try not to.
Never borrow more than you need. You don't want to increase the cost of your education more than you have to. Remember that every dollar you borrow today will cost 3 or more times that amount when you begin to repay.
Overborrowing. Borrowing that is uninformed, not knowing the implications of what they borrow and how it's going to affect not just their repayment. The repayment is the simple part of it. What it affects is their lives as mothers and fathers, as parents, as leaders of the community. Being informed and taking control makes you in charge. It lessens anxiety, and it just allows you to live with your shoulders kind of pulled back and feeling very comfortable about everything that you do.
There's a dirty little secret in financial aid as far as I'm concerned. We make the system work so smoothly, although it may not seem that when you're filling out all these forms, we make it so easy for the average person to borrow, and indeed borrow more than they need to. So that unless the student becomes an active participant in the process, becomes financially well-educated and savvy, it is altogether too easy to walk in, get some papers put in front of you, where do I sign? Sign right here, and borrow the maximum amount of student loans that they can acquire.
You have to start thinking about how you're going to manage your finances, which means that, number one, you don't want to borrow indiscriminately. You don't want to borrow also realizing that you have to repay whatever you borrowed while you're still training and have a limited income. Somehow you have to try to figure out how to defer that right from the start, so that the repayment policies on any loan, for instance, are very, very crucial. It's always better if you have the option to try to borrow from your family or friends, people that want to invest in your future. Because I'll tell you, once those interest payments start accruing, if you borrow the money from the bank and they want you to pay it off, when you still have limited income, they're not going to care. They're just going to try to go after you.
How much you borrow today and how you handle repayment can have serious repercussions. You have to pay back every dollar you borrow with interest. Don't limit the possibilities in the future by paying too much for your degree.
The things that we do as a student, the small incremental steps that we're taking in terms of our finances will have a dramatic impact on our future life. The dollars that we're spending on purchasing or borrowing now will be dollars that we pay back with future income, and we'll pay them back with interest. So it's important to realize that your professional life begins now.
You don't want to finish your training and owe everybody in the world money, have not paid anybody on time, because I tell you, you won't be able to borrow any money when you really need it for your family, because your credit will be simply awful.
I have a family, and when I finish medical school, my son, who's 13 now, will be almost ready for college. So it's not just me, you know, and my family's actually sacrificing now while I go to medical school. So, you know, I would like to keep the sacrifice at a minimum for them and allow them to be able to have some happiness from the sacrifice that they've made now. So that's why I do worry about my indebtedness, and I try to control it and keep things to a minimum.
You have to plan every day and every year as if you have to repay those debts at that time. Or think about it this way. Once it's all consolidated, you know, how can I pay it back? How much money will I have to make? And all of that's important. So I think you have to think about not only what that money could be used for today, you have to think about how you have to repay it and how you can repay it in the future.
It definitely limits the possibilities of what you can do afterwards a lot of times. Maybe it won't limit altogether, but in your thinking, just in terms of just how much you're going to owe back, like in 10 years. I mean, you know, you're taking out $2,000 here, $3,000 here, $30,000 here. You have to pay back like 3 times that sometimes, 2 times that. And though it seems like your money right now, it actually isn't. But you have to do what you have to do to move to the next level. So, I mean, that's the reality in it, but it's definitely something that's always in the back of your mind, or it should be in the back of your mind.
Keeping your credit good is extremely important, not only for today, but for future endeavors. You will probably have to borrow money to set up offices, and how you repay your loans now will have a great deal of effect on the interest rate and whether or not you're even able to obtain a loan.
You'll need as much help as you can get managing your finances, so keep your files and records organized. You never know when you might need them.
Organized records are one of the most important things a student can do to help manage their finances. An example of why organized records are important is the student is the only individual. You're the only person who is the constant in the equation. Think about it. You come to us from undergraduate school with debts. You're here for 4 or so years. You leave, and you're out. And the lifetime of a loan is probably something like 20, 30 years, even after you graduate. And the student, you, are the only person who's the constant in that equation.
I have a file cabinet that I keep pretty much everything in, and it's for each year I'll have one, and then I just, they'll usually call with question, if they ever call with a question or anything, or I change of address, I'll have all that information, readily available. I try to stay pretty organized. I mean, it's tough, but with the different amount of loans, because they change each year. I mean, a certain group will give you something one year, and then they won't give it to you for a year, and then the next year they want to give it to you. So yeah, you just have to keep up with it.
Imagine if our office, and we handle a lot of paperwork, runs at a 99% accuracy level. And that would be pretty good, I think. Under that scenario, that 1% error that we will make will represent 10 students' files that we will have lost. They're gone. We don't know where they are.
Well, I have files for everything. I have a file cabinet with everything. I have files for school, I have files for financial aid, I have files for all my bills, for my credit cards, for everything. I have a separate file. So when I do get the mail, I always, read it to make sure that it's current, make sure it's correct, and then I just have everything listed in the files in order.
But you should never do anything unless you photocopied. I mean, if you've sent anything out, you need to photocopy everything. Because I even had an experience where they said there was a fire in a building and they lost files. So you have to be very careful with that.
Well, I keep them all, but I don't actually read them all, which I'm finding now is a big mistake. So actually I did find a mistake in one of my loans that's supposed to be in deferment, and I found out that it was in forbearance. So since that, I've been making sure that I read all of the mail, and I keep it all in a central place. It's really important to stay on top, because if I had left that alone, then it would, 3 years later down the line, I wouldn't even remember, what was going on, and maybe I wouldn't be able to find some of the paperwork. So now I plan to really make sure that I get everything together, keep it in one central folder, and, follow up on things immediately.
Errors happen, but if your records are organized, it's easy to check the information you receive from your lender.
It's not a question of if a mistake's going to be made concerning your financial records and your student loans and all that. It's when and how bad. They're going to happen, so you have to have your records organized in such a fashion as you can regroup, and you can cover those things.
I believe that no one should manage your finances other than you. So therefore, it's always a good idea to check someone else's work.
Make sure you know who you're speaking to. Make sure you get the name of your lender and, the representatives, because you're the only one who really knows what you got and what your interest is. They're dealing with thousands of people, and, they're not going to always remember. So you have to always be on top of your own loan.
Because bankers, lenders, servicers, they do make mistakes. And whether they're intentional or unintentional, errors do occur. So it's always better to try and manage the finances yourself and just double check to make sure that the information that's given to you is accurate.
It's important that you know what you're being charged, how much, when the payments are due, the interest rates that you're paying, and how long it's going to take you to repay that loan. You need to check their records to make sure they are correct.
They'll sell your loan to some other company, and then they'll change your rate, and you have no idea that that's happened. So you have to be aware of who you owe.
The key there is manage. No, you can't do it every day. No one does everything. Not unless you have a full staff of accountants, etc. You can't do it. But if you just budget a little time every couple of weeks, once a month, where you just pay attention to this, make sure that you go through it, put things in the proper file, in the proper place, make your records, it becomes very easy.
Probably not every single one, but I do try to make sure that everything is right and the math is okay. I've checked several of them, not every single one, I haven't, but it's probably a good idea just in case there's a mistake.
Anticipate the problems that are going to occur.
When you have a dilemma, take action immediately. If you know your budget and keep good records, you can head off problems before they start.
One of the key concepts we try and get across to our students is to anticipate problems. We will tell a student, if you ever anticipate not being able to make a payment, that you never, ever, ever wait until the payment's past due to contact the lender. You contact the lender before the payment is due, because you will have any number of options prior to that loan going delinquent.
If it, just absolutely came down to I just can't do it, I would call them and try to explain the situation to them and hope that they would maybe, I don't know, give me an extension, or hope that they would understand the situation and allow, I don't know, maybe 2 payments the next month or something like that. Maybe try to work something out.
It's a matter of just being informed. Mail tells you things like your loan has been sold, or actually it tells you first that we're about to sell your loan. Then it's that your loan was sold. Now this is who has it. And then if you update your workbook or update your files, there's no need to even be concerned with it anymore.
There are professionals who are trained to give you the advice you need. But don't forget about family and friends either.
The best place to begin would be by contacting a financial aid officer at the Health Professions School. That is an individual who's paid to help you, is one of the most knowledgeable persons about student finances you will ever meet in your entire life, and is a resource or a person that you need on your financial team.
They know that you're in this situation and that it's kind of tough, and a lot of us are just out of undergrad and they were used to helping us then, and so I think they know what you're going to be, and they're eager to help you become that.
There's some resources that are available to you that you may not think of. For instance, doctors or mentors who've been successful. Successful businessmen know how to manage their money well. Now, talking to them about how they did it is a good idea, because they will expose you to financial managers who can give you good advice.
One effect of not managing your finances properly is default. That's a place you don't want to go. The consequences of defaulting on your student loans are serious and can haunt you for years. It also can make your entry into the professional world difficult.
A very good friend of mine defaulted on a student loan, and she had problems buying a house because a lot of the loans that you can get for housing are backed by the government. And I went to the loan officer with her, and she basically was told that because you defaulted on your student loan, which is backed by the government really doesn't trust you anymore. So she wasn't eligible for any of the government-backed loans, and she had to have a higher down payment and had to come up with a lot more money from other resources.
Consequences of default are significant. They can include, from the minimum, the ruining of your credit to your good name, as well as the attachment of any income tax refunds you might have from the federal government. Some states have the power to garnish wages. Some states indeed will revoke a professional license for an individual who's defaulted on his or her student loans, as well as the fact that the federal government will deny reimbursement for Medicare and Medicaid payments to not only the defaulted borrower, but any employer that has that individual as an employee.
There are many ways to keep yourself out of default, including scholarships and the military.
Today, with all the redesignations of the medically underserved areas and the health profession shortage areas, there's an opportunity to have more choices of placement for the National Health Service Corps when it's time to repay your debt. But today, there are a lot of urban areas where you actually can spend your time and begin your practice and actually stay in that community and thrive ultimately.
To get to know your financial aid officers at your school, send your FAF in on time. I didn't send mine on time and I lost out. Please know the date that your financial aid office says to send in before. Give them whatever information they need, because once the deadline is up, you can't do anything about it.
There is an opportunity also to finance your medical education or your health professions education through the military. The doctors that I know that have chosen the military as a career are very, very happy. With the military, there are so many options, there's so many places to practice. In fact, I have a lot of friends that started practicing in Hawaii just on the basis of a placement there. So They're just wonderful opportunities as well as a chance to see the world. So the military is really a good option.
You're on the road to a career in the healthcare professions. You'll need some direction navigating the road, so take advantage of all the help that is available to you in taking charge of your finances.
As the old business adage goes, the best customer is an educated consumer. Become an educated consumer of higher education. Take charge of your finances. Develop a financial plan, develop a budget, and stick to it. Get the biggest bang for your educational buck.
Looking back on all the years, all the investment and time, it's been really worth it. I'll tell you, if you manage your debt well, you can enjoy your life. You can have the car that you want. You can have the home that you want. You can have a very, very happy life and, in fact, have very little debt.